The reality of the rest cure. Now, the rest cure, we will learn about that by focusing on a story which focuses on a woman who slowly grows into depression due to the stress of becoming a new mother. The weeks following her child's birth, she grows thin and tired, soon fainting from a drop in blood pressure. When her husband notices her declining health, he calls in the doctor. Then the doctor recommends this new practice called the rest cure and what pertains to it, explaining that the process will last 6 weeks and that she will be separated from her family for the duration of it, while also not allowing any physical or mental stimulation. Describing its origin and connection to her plight, he starts her on it. At first she complies, believing that there is hope for it to work, but then grows restless and loses belief during a period of 3 weeks. On her next doctor's visit, she tries to explain the unsuccess of the program, but the doctor only focuses with glowing approval of her weight gain, which was giving her the appearance of improvement. Only after a period of 6 weeks does she finally get permission to live her daily life again. Her physical appearance had improved, but her mental state had only deteriorated more. It ends with her finally leaving the room that had become her prison. The claim of the rest cure. The rest cure claimed to solve postpartum depression by improving the health of the person involved, believing that by fixing the physical health and eliminating every possibility of stress, that it would get rid of the depression completely. But because they overlooked the mental aspect of postpartum depression, this practice was not successful.
The rest cure was used during and after the Civil War to treat soldiers who were men with nostalgia, which is modernly related to PTSD. This was the first successful medical use of the rest cure. It worked because nostalgia was a nervous injury caused by loud sounds and graphic sights, so being alone in a quiet room helped those individuals. Women at the time had no voice in the public sphere and took care of the home. They bore children for their husband and took care of both the children and their husband. Women were seen as fragile to society. This delicacy provoked the use of the rest cure on women. But as the first wave of feminism started its rise, the rest cure practice started to decline as society's viewpoint of women as fragile started to deteriorate. The rest cure was developed for use on women by Philadelphia neurologist Silas Weir Mitchell in the late 1860s and early 1870s. Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell started his medical career on the battlefield of the Civil War and became increasingly interested in neurological injuries. Mitchell was the director of treatment of nervous injuries and maladies at Turner's Lane Hospital in Philadelphia nearing the end of the Civil War. He treated nervous soldiers at first with the rest cure, but he eventually moved to treating nervous women with it. The cure was meant to help women's mental health. Women who were deemed mentally unstable would be sent to the doctor and often forced to go through the process of the rest cure. These women were put into a room alone, often for a period lasting from 6 to 8 weeks. They were given food on a restricted diet, and if refused to eat, they were physically forced to. This diet often consisted of large portions of meat and milk, and would eventually produce a sign of success in the treatment due to its high proteins, fats, and calcium. The signs of success for the cure were a gain in weight, often caused by the diet, or the start of a new menstrual cycle for the patient.
Charlotte Perkins Gilman wrote The Yellow Wallpaper, which is a short story describing a young woman's experience on the rest cure and her mental deterioration because of it. She wrote this with a feministic quality in mind as she was critical of the rest cure. She did not think it was helpful for women, and she wanted to shed light on how women were treated during the 19th century.
The rest cure was never scientifically based. It was based on physical changes, not mental or emotional healing. The women were put on rest cure to help with their postpartum depression. Why were the doctors looking at their physical changes and not the women's mental or emotional state? Many women would finish the rest cure and have a worse mental state than when they began it because of how isolated and inactive they were.
The doctors that were treating these women with the rest cure didn't consider the women's opinion even on their own body and well-being. There wasn't any medical science or way of doctors diagnosing these women in the 20th century. We now treat postpartum depression with treatments such as psychotherapy and antidepressants. Postpartum depression is diagnosed through talking to a doctor and doing depression screenings. This allows the doctors to understand the patient's feelings and know what's going on in their mental state, to then diagnose postpartum depression and figure out the best way to treat it. Through the Rest Cure, the doctors weren't talking or listening to the women to know how they were doing mentally. Psychotherapy helps with better ways to cope, solve problems, and set realistic goals. Giving women medication such as antidepressants helps to prevent mood swings, sadness, and irritability. Doctors now have screenings and conversations to see how much progress these women have made throughout treatments and to determine when they are well again. In conclusion, the Rest Cure evolved from treating men from the Civil War to treating depressed women, all with the goal of improving the physical appearance, believing that the mental is second in importance in the process of improvement. We now know that the process didn't help and only harm the patients. We can also see from looking at the rise and fall of the Rest Cure, the viewpoints towards women changed from them not being able to have a say in their own life to the eradication of the practice entirely with the rise of feminism, along with true scientific practices that have been proven to help with women's depression, proving that the Rest Cure in itself was useless.